You're listening to Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson Karbley. We're just two fans sharing our love for the game and Carolina Panthers football. So join us, crack open a cold one, some bubbly, a little wine, some scotch. We don't care, whatever makes you sleep better at night. Before we dive into the episode, a little self-promotion. Stop what you're doing. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap. Join the discussion on our Facebook group. We have over 2,500 members. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search Panthers on Tap. The 53-man roster is set for now. A lot of moves happening today across the league. A lot of trades. Bryson, how you doing tonight?
Good. A pretty exciting day. Not a whole lot of work done in regards to my full-time job, but definitely a lot of work done on Twitter and trying to get caught up with all the transactions for the day.
Yeah, I was so distracted at work. I mean, when they took forever to get those last three guys cut. I was literally just refreshing Twitter, refreshing the Panthers homepage, refreshing the depth chart. I'm like, come on, let's make these final cuts already. Yeah, it was an exciting day. We'll get into all this, but clearly I don't think the roster is set at this time. But we quickly just want to jump in. I know we were on the Keep Purring podcast the other day, kind of breaking down the preseason game. But for our listeners, I kind of wanted to just quickly go over some brief observations from the final preseason game this weekend, actually last Friday against the Lions. I mean, no secret. I thought Bryce Young looked really well. I mean, he's looked good up to this point, but he looked awesome in this last game. Decisive, spreading the ball around. He delivered on third downs. He delivered, obviously, in the red zone on that second drive. And then we finally got to see him run the ball and, showcase his escapability that you saw against Tennessee in college. And I'm trying to think of a couple other games that come to mind where he went off running, but that one just popped into my head. But, yeah, I know Carolina has finally gotten this QB position right.
Yeah, well, we thought that last year too with Baker Mayfield. But this is a different situation for sure. Baker Mayfield came in, another man's trash. Bryce Young has come in the number one draft pick, one of the best prospects coming out of college ever. And he's shown, the ability of, like you mentioned, the escapability, the quick decisions, the maneuvering in and out of the pocket when he needs to run for the first down when there's nothing open down the field, when his wide receivers are getting zero separation. I mean, he showed it all this preseason in a limited amount of time, I think, and definitely this past game was his best for sure. I think it was really important for us to see him to get that touchdown, that elusive touchdown that he's not gotten up to this point in the preseason, due mostly probably to his limited playing time, but. Yeah, I'm sure that felt good for him. And like you mentioned, his escapability, his elusiveness, his shiftiness. I mean, it's just I think his running ability is just so underrated coming out of college. I think a lot of teams are going to have to account for that because he's already shown the willingness to do it when he has to. And I think that's going to be an invaluable part to this offense, especially if, we still have the struggles that we saw this third preseason game with the wide receivers and not getting a whole lot of separation. Bryce Young's going to have to create a lot on his own. And so, yeah, I think it was definitely positive coming out of this game. And again, I'm happy that he got that touchdown like we talked about last week and take that proper step forward to start week one.
Yeah, he did exactly what we wanted and what we talked about, go out. I mean, I was hoping maybe the first drive would lead to a touchdown. It didn't. They kind of got gummed up there in the red zone, and then they come out the second drive. Frank brought him back out. And I mean, JT O'Sullivan, if you haven't watched his stuff on the QB school, I mean, he's been preaching every single game that he breaks down to Bryce Young. His anticipation is off the charts. It's ridiculous. Like, he's throwing the ball before guys are getting out of breaks, and it is on the money and just a dot. So,
yeah, JT said that he already has some of the best anticipation in the NFL, and he hasn't played it down in the NFL.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just a vast difference from what you've seen from these QBs the last couple of years coming into Carolina. So that was good to see. Derek Wright, we'll talk about him later, but he started in this game with injuries. He made a couple plays. JT, I know you were talking about this on Twitter as well, but I mean, he was nailing the Panthers wide receivers. He was hard on those guys in that Lions game. I mean, they did obviously score and stuff, but he was calling, he kept referring to Thielen number 19 really slow, like what the hell are you doing out of breaks and things. So that room, they got to clean some stuff up. And I get it, guys are injured, so that I think JT needs to realize too is like, some of these guys aren't, starters necessarily. Derek Wright, he's more of a rotational guy in there, but I liked what I saw. I thought Mingo looked good too. His connection just continues with Bryce Young.
Yeah, definitely. I thought Mingo was definitely promising coming out of that game. He's still learning. I think Bryce and Mingo are still working together to get that, to be on the same page at all times. Of course, that's going to be a natural transition for Mingo coming from Ole Miss and Bryce Young being a rookie quarterback and them not having much playing time together. So, there was that one out route towards the sideline where it looked like Bryce Young underthrew it pretty bad, but Mingo ran the wrong route. He was supposed to cut it off, sharper towards the out of bounds line, and he kind of faded it a little bit. So, just small things like that. Mingo will hopefully catch on, the more time that they have together. And I think that Mingo could easily end up being the wide receiver one on this roster. I think he's got all the ability that the other guys have. And the only thing that he's lacking at this point is the experience. So hopefully being able to get real game time speed and game time play with Bryce Young during the regular season will only enhance his abilities and then allow him to take that next step as wide receiver one in Carolina.
Yeah, Blackshear, I know he had a really nice pickup on a blitz. I believe it was a first or second drive that really saved Bryce Young with a nice throw down the field. I noted Moten. I thought Moten had a pretty good day. It was in the second drive. He pancaked the guy right to the ground. And when I was watching it live, I'm like, did Moten just do that? And then I watched like the first quarter and a half back, and he just leveled the guy. It was great, just dominated. But I thought overall the offense line, they may have had one or two plays, the starters that you might want to have back. But overall, I thought they played really well. And it sounded like the one that Icky gave up was more of a coverage sack than anything. No one was open.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is progression there. Obviously, there's still some concern with, it's a young group. With Zavala out there as well. So, that'll be interesting to see how that develops when they go against, the starters of these teams, because the Lions were playing their second and third string guys. So, but overall, I thought that O-line group it was their best performance out of the 3 games they played.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Icky definitely had a bounce back. I thought that, like you mentioned, the sack that he gave up was a coverage sack. They were running some deep crossers, and neither wide receiver was open, and Bryce just had nowhere to go with the ball. That's why he was holding on to it. And that's what led to the sack. So I think Icky did what he was supposed to. He pushed the defensive end out and around, and then he just had enough time to get back around to the quarterback. So, yeah, I thought overall the offensive line bounced back like we would hope against the Lions' second string and third string defensive line. So definitely if they struggled mightily with them, we would be, red flags going into week 1. But luckily, they, as well as Bryce, got a right step forward. And again, going into week 1, hopefully have that confidence to go out there and get a win.
What'd you think about the defensive play across the board?
Yeah, I was disappointed in the defense overall. Teddy Bridgewater had that 60-yard touchdown pass to a player who's no longer on the team, which we'll get into later, against a player that's no longer on the team. I thought Teddy looked decent versus Panthers 1s and 2s, and they had a couple stops here and there, but I thought no pressure whatsoever from the defensive line, which of course Derek Brown and Brian Burns and Justin Houston weren't in, but still you would hope that the Panthers backups could get some pressure against the Lions backup offensive line and backup quarterback. So really looks like they struggled there. getting pressure. Corners didn't look great throughout the game, but it is what it is. A lot of these players that we're talking about that were playing, are unfortunately not on the team anymore. So, and that's what the bad play leads to. And that's the business side of the NFL is, the best ability is availability, and the second best is being a good player. And if you're not a good player, then you're not going to make the roster.
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah, I thought the defense played well the first series against Teddy. Carolina kicked off after, I think it was the field goal, and they had that really big return, the Lions did. So the defense was backed up in their own territory, and they held them to a field goal, and I believe he missed it. So I thought they played well that first series, and then after that, it was really nothing. And then right before half was a disaster. I mean, they gave up 10 points or something right before, with 2 minutes left. So that was just piss poor play on their part. Grugier Hill, I mean, that guy he's always flying around. He made a lot of plays. I noted a YGM pressure. That always doesn't happen often. I thought Leota played decent. And then Brandon Smith, I thought, was flying around. He played a lot on special teams. We'll get to him later. CJ Henderson. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say DJ Johnson had a pretty good game as well. I saw him flash a couple of times.
Yeah, he played a lot too. He played a lot in this game.
He set the edge real well in the run game, and he actually had a tackle for a loss. So it was good to see that from him. CJ
Henderson wanted to mention, I thought it was his worst game and felt like he came back down to earth he just seems like a really good training camp and preseason guy typically. And then once, the lights come on when it really matters, he just crumbles. Yeah. So I thought that's what he did. There was a couple plays. He had a really bad missed tackle. It looks like he panics when the ball's in the air. So wasn't a big fan of that. And, he's currently cornerback 3 on the roster. So just something to keep in mind. But I think across the board, it was good to see Eddie out there. Talk a little bit of special teams. Eddie Pinheiro made his kicks. They brought back in Matthew Wright, and I think it was third or fourth quarter. But Eddie looked good out there. Good to see him get some game reps before the season starts. So it looks like he'll be ready to go, and hopefully it's a redemption game against Atlanta for him. In Atlanta. Well, let's get to today's stuff. Enough about this past game, because there's a lot that happened. Bryson, I don't know about you, but when I woke up at, I think, 7:30, and I was not expecting a trade to happen already for Carolina whatsoever. I woke up and I had saw the tweets already, and I'm like, oh, here we go. So Scott Fitter, been saying, I literally tweeted this out in July, been saying it since then. He always makes a late August trade. This was the one today. Amir Smith-Marset, they acquire him from the Chiefs. They swapped 7th round conditional picks, and I believe it was from Arizona that Carolina traded that one to. They acquired from Arizona. I don't remember when, but let's talk about this wide receiver, because obviously they liked him. It sounded like Chiefs fans liked him. So what are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, this is a guy that was showing out in the preseason. I believe he had 295 yards and 2 touchdowns in the preseason. I think he was second in the league in regards to yards in the preseason. So that's impressive. Highest graded wide receiver by Pro Football Focus in the preseason. So this is a guy that has flashed in not only this season, but a previous season and in college. I mean, he won an award for best kick returner in the country when he was with Iowa. So he's got the attitude that you like. He's got that cocky wide receiver attitude. He's fast, something that Carolina needs. I know Frank mentioned today that he can run routes good, play all 3 positions at the wide receiver, and he's got good hands. So I think this is a guy that can come in and make a difference, if it's not just in kick return and punt return, but also on the field playing wide receiver.
What did he say in that presser? I forgot about. Someone tweeted it out today. Like he's the best wide receiver out there, or fastest, something like that.
Oh yeah, Amir did. He said I'm the baddest motherfucker that plays the position.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like that. Yeah.
They like guys with juice, and so do I. I think that just brings another element. He also, I saw someone had tweeted out a video. I think it was from preseason. He had a really good block as well on a play that set up a touchdown run. So, and that Frank Reich likes wide receivers who can block. So I think that's just another benefit, for him on this roster, because they're going to want to run the ball too. So that was good. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a good move. Add some speed to this team. It looks like, he's played I think 3 or 4 years in this league already. I think he's dealt with some injuries as well, but it seems like he's all healthy. And, that when another fan base, and it's always a good gauge because those people are watching just like we are as every game. When you see a fan base's reaction to a guy getting cut and it's, they're pissing and moaning and mad about it, it's typically a good thing.
Yeah.
You try to, I remember when, Panthers pick up a guy from the Jaguars a couple years ago. I can't remember. It might have been Henderson. And people were like, oh, you guys can have him. Of course, as a fan, you're excited. You don't know much. You're like, yeah, we're great. This guy was a first-round pick. We're happy to have him. And then you kind of see what they were talking about in those tweets. You're like, oh, shit. Like, yeah. So it's always a good thing when you see that coming out, because it's typically a pretty good measuring stick of, how this guy is going to pan out. But, yeah, I like it. I mean, they clearly had a need, and this guy has some return ability as well. And I think, Frank said today he's going to, challenge for both punt and kick returns with Blackshear. Blackshear was really the only one on the roster doing it. So that is good to see. And I'm excited because, that he flashed this preseason. Well, let's talk about the cuts today, because I want to say there was 25 total and then some other moves in there. I'm going to pull up this graphic if I can figure this damn thing out.
Still learning, huh?
So give me a second here. Yeah, and I cannot find this damn thing. So you're just going to have to wait with me. Here we go. All righty. So here are all the cuts from today. Where are you at? I'm here it is. Beautiful. All righty. So let me hit full screen on this thing. There we go. And then let me get rid of this guy and we'll be golden. Okay. So here's all the cuts across the board. Again, there was 25, and then you obviously have the Corbett designation on the pup. So he is going to miss the first 4 weeks of the season. And then Henry Anderson put on IR. He will be out the entire year. Unfortunate, obviously, for him and the D-line, because that's another hit the D-line has taken, and they're thin there. But across the board, Bryce, I just wanted to get your take. What were the surprise cuts for you?
Yeah, I think that there were a couple surprise cuts, that in my opinion, at least. I think Shi Smith and Wims both getting cut over Derek Wright was kind of something that we might have saw coming just based off of this last preseason game and Derek Wright pretty much running with the ones and done when the ones were done. But, I think between me and you, I thought, we considered the competition between Shi and Javon Wims for that 6 wide receiver spot. But Derek Wright was the one that ended up making it, and then they eventually kept 7 with the trade for Smith-Marset. So 7 wide receivers, which I was so sure they wouldn't do, but they ended up doing anyways. So, yeah, I think both of those guys getting cut was surprising to me. Justin McCray, a player that was signed super early in free agency for this team. He's got history with the offensive line coach Campen, and got the versatility. He might not be the best backup offensive lineman, but he's got versatility to play center and guard, and knows that Campen style on the offensive line. So him cut was a little bit of a surprise to me. One of the biggest surprises, in my opinion, which I just tweeted not too long ago, was Raequan Williams. I was really impressed with Raequan Williams throughout this whole entire, training camp and preseason. I feel like he's flashed in both at camp and in games, which is something that Cody Jones didn't do. He was more of the camp darling and then a no-show in the preseason. But Raequan Williams, I felt like, showed every game that he could make a difference on that defensive line, and that's not a deep room, especially with McCall being gone. And I thought Williams was pretty much a lock for this roster. So seeing his name announced was definitely a surprise. And then, of course, everybody was shocked to see Deion Jones' name called. Deion Jones was a player that we all thought was going to play an integral part on this defense in that Ejier Evero scheme and be a starting linebacker for this team. And he was one of the early cuts, I felt like, today, and that was very surprising. And then just to follow him up with Brandon Smith being cut, they really like a specific linebacker that we'll get into later. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see those guys, a couple other ones, but that pretty much takes it all for me. But yeah, I definitely some names that I did not expect to see overall, and it kind of leaves me a little bit worrisome for some positional groups on this team.
Yeah, I would say Raquan Williams was one of the bigger shockers with them cutting McCall earlier. Everyone thought this guy was going to be, the shoe-in at the nose tackle position, and, Mike hated a piece on him. It just seemed like that was the sell for him to be in that spot. And then we'll get into the guy who's in there now as the starter later. But that was probably the biggest one for me. I would say close second is Deion Jones. I did not expect that at all. Clearly they want to go young with that position. But I thought, with the brief time he was here, I thought he made plays in preseason. I don't know if, he is someone they can bring back on the practice squad, or if he wants to be at that position. Probably not, I would think. But that was a guy I was kind of shocked. And also Keith Taylor. I didn't think they were going to keep 4 corners as of this point. And obviously that I think things will be changing here soon. But that one I did not see coming. I thought for sure he would be still on this roster. I get it. He did. I'm one of them, and I'm sure you were too. And we ripped him last year in that Bucs game. But for like a 4th and 5th corner, I think he's valuable. I don't think he's a starter, but for a rotational guy that needs to come in and fill in sometimes, didn't think he was terrible. I thought he had flashes throughout, last year here and there. So that was one. Brandon Smith, I know I had him on my 53 roster. I know you're the one who had him cut. But I'm not too surprised by that because, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, I cannot get out of my head what he did in that practice I went to where he made that bonehead play on Tremble and just blew the shit out of him for no reason. And it sounded like, he didn't have much value on special teams, and that's something that Carolina is lacking right now, and why some other guys made the roster because of their value in special teams. But he didn't really have that much value for that spot. So again, they get rid of him. 4th round pick. It's a high pick. I think it was last year, right? Penn State. So,
Yeah.
Not shocked that Cam Irving was cut, but I mean, I kind of agreed with you last week. I thought maybe they'd take a swing, to keep him as the swing tackle. Obviously, they thought otherwise there. I'm not surprised by the move. I think he was terrible, but just that veteran leadership, I feel like I could have seen them keeping him around, but, they didn't. And then STL, I'm sad to see him go. I think the injury kind of hindered his, growth on the team and didn't help at all. But yeah, I think that's for the most part. I'm just trying to look here. Deontay Brown, he just never figured out his weight. I mean, that was always the big issue with him.
I was personally surprised to see Eric Rowe cut. I know you alluded to having him being cut, but based off of his coverage abilities. But I thought that he was, he flashed some good tape and some bad tape in the preseason, and he was a player that they targeted in free agency. So I thought they would keep him around, as that nickel corner. But yeah, they moved on. They moved on quickly.
Yeah, Leota was another guy. I didn't think he'd make the roster, but I might mention him later. There's a little tease for you of a guy that they'll probably try to pick up on the practice squad. I liked him. I thought he made a couple good plays this last game that stood out to me. Some of these other corners, I don't remember seeing a whole lot from them, like Herb Miller and McCain and Milton, some of those guys. I just didn't see a whole lot from them. Greg Mabin, none of these guys' names popped out to me, on Twitter or anything, just out of highlights.
Yeah.
We got to mention Michael Jordan. I think that was the inevitable, and everyone wanted that to happen, just how bad he played in preseason. Just want to say my sympathies to Kevin Avery for that he's no longer on the roster and thinking he was better than Brady Christensen. So, but yeah, I mean, no, I think I saw someone tweet this out today that both MJs in Charlotte were, cut in a week. I mean, the other MJ wasn't cut, but
good riddance. Get out.
So, but yeah, that's kind of across the board. You mentioned Wims. That was another guy we talked about. I think Kobe Jones. We'll get into the practice squad a little bit later, but that's kind of the roster cuts for today. What about Corbett? Were you hoping? I mean, I'm assuming you were hoping he was going to be out in their regular season earlier. Kind of stinks that he's not going to be there until week 5.
Yeah, I would think that if Zavala didn't come in and play up to the ability that he had so quickly in the preseason, they probably would have tried to get Corbett back week 1 and not, giving him that time on the PUP of missing the first 4 weeks. But I think Zavala kind of eased a lot of that nervousness that they were having and being able for Corbett to kind of take that extra time and just make sure he's 100% healthy and not try to force himself back onto the field before he's ready. So I think Zavala helped out with that.
Yeah, let's move away from the cuts now. Let's go to the actual roster here. And I actually have this ready to go.
Dang.
God willing here. So we're ready to roll if I can actually find. Yep, there it is. Look at that. Record time.
Wow.
A lot of words on here, but I wanted to fit every position into one graphic so you guys can kind of look at this and we can go position by position on this roster here. Let's start with the QB. Really no surprise, maybe other than Matt Corral. We both had Matt Corral as that 3 QB. I just think there's value with keeping that emergency quarterback. And, the 49ers proved that last year with what happened to them in the playoffs. That's not to say, though, they don't, get rid of him if something else opens up a need, at another position. And I still think this is insane to me. New England's got 1 QB right now. Maybe they like Corral. Maybe Fitter can, figure out some sort of trade to Belichick because that blows my mind.
Did they cut Malik Cunningham? They cut Malik Cunningham?
They have 1 QB on the roster right now. Yeah, they cut Cunningham and Zappy, which is –
oh, my goodness.
I thought for sure once they cut Zappy, Cunningham was the signing. But no, they literally have 1 QB on their roster right now, which is crazy to me. I don't want to talk about the Patriots. We're not getting into that. But I'm like, and it's funny because the Panthers traded with the Patriots to take Corral. That would be hilarious if, New England was interested. But you never know. I mean, because you look at, Joe Burrow, it sounds like he'll probably be ready to go. But, Cincinnati, or would they be a team that would be interested in Corral? But really no surprise there for me with the QB room.
Yeah, same. But my question is, I don't know how. I thought the 3rd quarterback on the roster won't count against a roster spot on the team. Is that not the case?
He won't count against an active player for game day.
Okay.
So I forgot what it is. I think it's like you can suit up like 40 some guys or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
And on game day, he won't count against that number. That's what it is.
That makes sense. That makes sense because this whole time I was like, Corral's not going to get cut because he doesn't count against them. But yeah, okay, that makes more sense. And I still think that they made the right choice keeping him on the team because worst comes to worst, he's there and he's developing behind Andy Dalton and Bryce Young. But maybe somebody comes calling and is interested in Matt Corral and you get some draft capital back for him. So I think that he's, by all accounts, a good teammate. He's been through some pretty shitty situations to start his NFL career and seems like he's kind of kept his head up and not taken, other routes that he could have, being a bad teammate and throwing a big, temper tantrum to become a starter, get force a trade or anything like that. So, keeping a guy like that around, I don't think is a bad idea.
Bryson, what do you think of this wide receiver room? We'll talk about running backs too, but 7, and we talked about this on Keep Hurry, and we both, I was shocked they kept 7. Did not expect that. Again, there could be changes coming. It sounds like that this is not set in stone yet, but I'm just a little shocked they would. It just seems, I don't know what the right word is. It just seems like a crowded room right now, and I'm not saying like all these guys are great talent. I think there could be other guys out there that are better, but 7 seems like a lot for me.
Yeah, I think that they probably keep 7, but if they need to move somebody, it would likely be Derek Wright, in my opinion, to get another guy on this roster if they want to add to the cornerback room or defensive line or anything like that. I feel like Derek Wright and then a couple of these tight ends that we're going to talk about are the guys that are next on the chopping list for this roster. But overall, I think if this room can stay healthy, it's a deep room. I mean, they have talent across the board here, and it's the biggest thing again is just health. DJ Shark's coming into the season injured. TMJ is coming into the season injured. Laviska was in a red jersey today, so we want them to stay healthy. Adam Thielen's 33 years old and struggling to separate in the preseason. JT O'Sullivan was very, very blunt about that. So, I think that this is a group that has potential, but again, they got to stay healthy. They got to get schemed up correctly, which I believe this coaching staff will do, and get open for Bryce to be able to easily complete some passes, because Bryce can't be back there behind this offensive line that we don't know how is going to perform at this point, trying to create every single play, because that is not a way to start your career. And I don't want to talk about the repercussions of that. So there's a lot riding on this wide receiver room, and I hope that they can fulfill what this team needs them to do.
Yeah, I'm excited for Derek Wright. He kind of reminds me of the CJ Saunders of last year, but he made the roster, which I'm excited for. I feel like he's got a really good connection with Bryce Young. There's no doubt about it. In training camp and preseason, those two have connected numerous times. Again, I do think he's like the lower man on the totem pole here, but I'm glad he made the roster. I think it was time for Shi Smith. I'm sure he might get picked up on another team, but I just think it's time to try something new at that 6-7 spot at wideout. We really don't know a lot what's going to happen with Chenault. I know that's been, Frank has been hinting at this Deebo Samuel role forever. We didn't see that obviously in the preseason games because they wanted to hide it, and then he gets the concussion. So that, and it sounds like he's progressing through that right now. So I don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1, but his role is kind of up in the air. Obviously, TMJ sounds like he's suited up today, so that's good news for Carolina. Mingo, I think, is, I feel like has, kind of reached expectations, or he's, overachieved so far, for me at least. I feel like he's played a lot more than I thought he would out of the gate. And, that connection, obviously, we talked about, and he does need to clean some things up with Bryce Young, but I feel like that's going to be stronger than ever as the season goes on. You always like to tie a rookie QB with a rookie wide receiver, so that's good. And then DJ Chark, whenever, sounds like he's hoping to be ready for week 1 with that hamstring injury. So if these guys can stay healthy, I don't think this room is terrible. It's just when you lose they drop 1 or 2 guys, this room gets very thin, which is a little concerning. Let's talk about backs real quick. No real shockers for me here. Spencer Brown did play a lot. I think that's a guy eligible for the practice squad. But Blackshear, Chuba, and Sanders was not surprised. Frank likes his running backs. He likes to use them all. He did that in Indy. I just really wasn't shocked. I thought these guys were the clear-cut, guys to make the roster, and I think you felt the same way.
I absolutely did, and don't be surprised when that depth chart comes out and Blackshear's the number 2 and Chuba's the 3. Again, I've been preaching that all offseason, and I think that Blackshear has shown a lot of positive things on tape in the preseason to give this coaching staff confidence in him. But yeah, this group was not surprising to me at all. But I do want to get into a group that I think, my goodness, was a huge surprise, and they kept every tight end on the damn roster. So five tight ends. Giovanni Ricci's kind of like that H-back, fullback kind of player, but listed as a tight end. Kept all 5 of them, Curtis. What's your opinion on that?
I'm shocked as you are. I'm really happy Ricci made the roster. I really like him. I always did. I've talked about him last year. It sounds like they like his special teams play, and that's why he made the spot, and they're still thin at special teams, and I think that's the main reason. It sounds like, just reading the tea leaves, that Sullivan could be a candidate for the IR, and that's why he's still on the roster. And I was reading something today that if they put him on IR tomorrow, it won't. He can still come back this season. So that might be why they have the 5 there. Ian Thomas, we talked about it. Were you the one? I think you were the one, or me. Whoever said it, but someone said that's probably. I think we both talked about it. He's a potential, could be cut.
Yeah.
But clearly they thought otherwise. But yeah, I was totally shocked with the 5. I did not expect that. But I think there's going to be some maneuvering here within the next day, and don't be surprised if Sullivan is put on IR and brought back whenever his time is up there. But I'm happy for Ricci. I liked him. I always do. I like him over Thomas, and people aren't going to agree with me. I like him his catching ability over Tremble. I do. I think he's a solid player. He's got good hands, dude. He does.
Well, I mean,
he's got good hands.
Ricci definitely looked like the best this past preseason game. I mean, he flashed. He made some great catches. So I don't disagree that he's a good player. Of course, I like Tommy Tremble a lot, and I think that he is going to flash when provided that opportunity in the regular season. But yeah, I wasn't aware of the Stephen Sullivan injury, so that's interesting, and that'll allow them obviously to open up another spot on the roster and claim some of these guys that we're going to get into later. So that's an interesting thing there. But yeah, Ricci, definitely happy he made the roster. Dating back to last year, I feel like he made a difference in the regular season as well when he was provided opportunity. So it's good to see him on the roster and sticking around. One of these rule guys that he found that very few that are left that are still in this roster.
Yeah, and I feel like Ricci, if you look back at last year, he was probably one of the top special team guys behind Sam Franklin. I'm trying to think, because I know Barno played a lot on special teams last year, but Ricci was a guy that was always down by the ball too. So I get it. I'm surprised that I did not think he was going to make it. I thought for sure it was just going to be Hurst, Tremble, and Thomas, but clearly they saw his value with special teams. Let's go to O-line, because this room is young, like really young. They do not. The oldest guy on this roster is what?
Taylor Moton, right?
Taylor Moton or Bozeman. I mean, if you're not including Corbett with his injury, Corbett, I think, is probably actually the oldest. I'm not entirely sure on that. Don't quote me. But one of those guys, the rest is, Icky's second year, Brady is third year, Zavala rookie, Cade May's second year, and then 2 undrafted free agents, which is insane. I don't mind it though. I like, they have a lot of trust in, this room, and they also have a lot of trust in Campen as well to develop these guys. Nash Jensen shined in preseason and training camp. Ricky Lee, shout out to Dave with PMP. That's his guy. He went to A&T, which is crazy, up here in Greensboro. So he's got a lot of games under his belt. Obviously not the NFL, and neither with Nash Jensen, but this room is young, dude. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's good. That's never a bad thing to have a young team. So yeah, I wasn't super surprised with any of these except for Ricky Lee. I felt like he surprised me as a guy to make this roster, and it seems like they chose him over Cameron Irving, and Ricky Lee could fill in as that swing tackle. So I'm happy for that. Somebody new and potentially better than, well, most definitely better than Cameron Irving. So. It's a group that doesn't really have a whole lot of depth at this point, but when Corbett comes back and Zavala falls off, or he replaces Brady Christensen at left guard potentially, it's a room that, I mean, it's a good room actually. So yeah, I'm confident that these guys can perform up to the ability that we need them to protect Bryce Young throughout his career here in Carolina. I really think Icky's going to bounce back, and he had a great year last year as a rookie. He's a super smart guy. He's not gonna have these mental errors every game. And like I mentioned on the Keep Purring podcast, I believe it was I actually I can't remember who tweeted it, but he said that the coaching staff has been trying a lot of new like schemes and pass offs and stuff like that on the offensive line just in the preseason, just to kind of get their feet wet and see how it worked. And obviously some of it didn't work very well. So they tried it during the preseason when they were supposed to try it. And I'm sure they've learned what works and what doesn't. And, hopefully week 1, they'll be ready to perform to the best of their ability.
I will say this, surprised with the number of guys. I thought for sure there'd be a 1 or 2 more added to this room. I think we both had like 9 or 10 for this position in this O-line group. So I definitely think this position, we'll get in this later with waivers and signings, but I definitely think they need to add another tackle. They need some guys behind their starters and depth there. So that's something to just keep in mind as, again, waiver claims tomorrow. We'll get into that here soon, but just a position to watch because I still think there needs to be additions in that group. Let's go to the defense and start with D-line here. Again, I think we talked about it with Raekwon Williams, not what we expected. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about Nick Thurman or Ray, but what do you think of this room? This room is another one I think that is probably going to be added to over these next couple days.
Yeah, I hope it is. This is a very thin room here. Again, like you mentioned, I don't remember seeing Nick Thurman play at all. I kept seeing his name pop up on depth charts and people talk like mentioning him on Twitter, but I can't remember a single play from this guy. So I was surprised to see that he's listed as the starter. And I do remember Ray making a couple plays late in, I think, week 2 of the preseason. But yeah, I mean, this is a room that I thought Raekwon Williams and Taylor Stallworth were going to be the 2 guys there, not Nick Thurman and LeBrian Ray. So very, very surprised with that.
Yeah, it's just a room like a week ago was like totally different. And now it's, 2 guys. I had to look up Thurman's number. I didn't know what number he was. So again, maybe I'm just, being an idiot and not paying attention too much to those, late quarters, but I don't remember much from him. But clearly they liked him. But again, this is a room I think they need to add depth with. Let's go to linebackers. Thoughts on that? I feel like there was a couple surprises in there.
Yeah, Chandler Wooten, obviously a surprise for me. Really didn't. I mean, being honest, I wrote him off. I didn't think he was going to make the roster. I thought that they'd keep somebody like Brandon Smith or Deion Jones over him. But yeah, to see him listed and from all reports, they're confident not only in his special teams ability, but his ability to be a linebacker and play meaningful snaps on defense. So that's cool. That's good to hear. And hopefully Chandler does take that next step and becomes a solid depth piece for Carolina. But other than that, not really too surprised from anybody else in this room other than the subtraction of Deion Jones. Of course, Grugier Hill, probably the camp MVP is who I would pick. He's flashed and really earned that spot there. And that's probably part of the reason why they felt comfortable releasing Deion Jones and Brandon Smith. And then, of course, DJ Johnson, the rookie. I feel like he's had a really good preseason. And, a lot of people wrote him off because of his lack of production in college, his age. But he's kind of come in and made a name for himself pretty quickly, setting the edge there opposite of Burns. So, this is a room that could potentially you could see some additions, but I think that if they don't, it's a pretty good group.
Yeah, just looking at it, I'm the same with you, Wooten. I like Deion Jones. I would have taken that. That would have been my selection at that spot, just with depth. Um, we don't want to talk about it as a surprise, but I think people are just trying to hide from it. Why GM? Everyone wrote his ass off. We all did. I did. A lot of people were saying, he's going to be playing out of position. I don't think he's really shined. I think he's just been available with Marquise Haynes out, which has helped him. But I feel like a lot of people weren't, thinking he might make the roster this year and he might be traded, or, if they could find a suitor or cut or whatever. So I'm curious to see what he does with that this year, because it's make or break for him this year. If he doesn't do anything, he's gone. I would be shocked. Marquise Haynes dealing with injury. This was really his year to shine, play that, that starter role. Obviously he gets injured with the back. In comes Justin Houston. He's not going to be more than a rotational piece again, unless Houston goes down. So that's a bummer for him, but best ability sometimes is availability. So that you got to make the best of it, and he better make every situation count going in from here on out. I'm happy for Barno though. I thought he's had a really good offseason. Everyone kind of compares him to like a slimmer or younger Brian Burns. He's got that speed off the edge. He's fast. He's a fast dude. Yeah. But I feel like he's starting to come into his own a little bit, and that's good to see. DJ Johnson, I'm still not sold yet. I'm the critic on him. I see what the other, what the Steelers got out of the trade from Carolina, and I have a hard time watching Washington at tight end with the Steelers. The guy's a big motherfucker, and he can catch the ball. And Nick Herbig, I'm biased because he was a Badger, but that guy has lit it up in preseason, and they got both of those guys for the price of DJ Johnson. So he better show up, because more and more that's looking like, I don't know if they should have made that move, but we'll see. It's so early. I don't want to count him out yet. He hasn't played a game. I get it. Don't be getting in the DMs on Twitter with me on that. But just from what I've seen, I'd like to see more out of a guy they traded up for. And then hats off to Grugier Hill. That guy, I remember reading the article when he came in. This guy's going to be a special teams guy, not much more than that. And he has come in and showed out this entire offseason, and I'm pulling for him. And he's got that connection with Luvu, and kind of reminds us of like a mini Luvu as well, just what his presence was when he came in. So happy. I like this room, and I didn't think, I think this offseason we talked about, we were worried about, and I still think there's some depth issues here, but I'm satisfied with the linebackers and the DNs. I think Justin Houston is going to provide a boost too. We haven't even seen it yet. Yeah. I don't know if you saw today, but David Newton's like, yeah, we don't really know what you guys are going to do. And Frank's like, good, mission accomplished. So that was, Frank, you can tell, and it's different from obviously the past regime, but he really likes to hide, keep his cards close to his chest before the season starts, which, again, I don't knock him for. I don't think any of us really know what this defense is going to look like, because all the starters haven't played all together at once. So it's kind of exciting that, we're going to first see this, and Atlanta's going to first see this week one and not know what to expect. So
yeah, and we'll be there in person to watch it and cheer when Carolina comes out with a win. But let's move on to the most worrisome group on the team, and for me at least, and that is the cornerback room. There are 4 players, 2 of which that have extensive injury history listed on this roster as it currently stands. J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson, of course, C.J. Henderson at 3, and Troy Hill at 4. This is a room where Keith Taylor was cut, Stanley Thomas Oliver was cut, and a couple others. And there's just not a whole lot of depth here. JC or Dante, God forbid, gets injured again, and we got to rely on CJ Henderson opposite one of them, or opposite of Troy Hill in the worst case scenario. We're going to be having flashbacks to that Bucks game last year. So this is a room that they definitely are going to add to. I know Joe Person had tweeted that they are actively looking to add another player to this group. So I'm sure they're scouring the cuts today. Maybe a potential trade is in the works. But yeah, this group is thin. Very worried about this group overall, just because of the history of the injury that we've had at this position. Like you mentioned, CJ didn't look great in his final preseason game. We know how he struggles with, when the ball's in the air and him just freaking out and kind of getting nervous and pass interfering or just stopping coverage at times. So we don't really know what Troy Hill is in Carolina at this point. So hopefully JC and Dante stay healthy. But yeah, this room, they definitely need to add a piece or two, probably two, just based off of the top two corners injury history in this room.
Yeah, this was the position group I was probably most or second most shocked with besides tight end. I think I had 5 corners going into the season, so I guess I was on the lower end with how many corners they were going to keep. But little shocked that, again, they didn't keep Taylor. I thought for sure he was going to be corner, 4, excuse me, and then Troy Hill 5. But again, I think this is a position they will add to. I don't think they're done yet. I think there's going to be moves made tomorrow probably with waiver claims and all that, or even a signing or a trade. I don't think Scott's done yet with those things. So I wouldn't be too worried yet, but it is like this is a position of concern for me because J.C. Horn was out, a couple of weeks in training camp with his injury, or before training camp, I should say, from mini camp then to when training camp started. And then obviously Dante Jackson's already had, I think it was a tweaked ankle on the opposite foot from his surgery. So, and Dante gets hurt every other week in the regular season, so you got to already throw that in there. So, I mean, we can't go into the season. I'm not comfortable with having C.J. Henderson, lining up as a starter almost on every down like that. There's got to be a rotation there because I just don't have faith in him. Yeah. From what he's shown these last year and a half, 2 years with Carolina. I feel like the most group that everyone I think would have probably had right was the safeties. I think we both had. I mean, I guess you just thinking about it and with the corners, you kind of got to throw Jeremy Chin. I actually had Jeremy Chin as a corner because he's technically like the nickel corner, but everyone that I've seen put him in the safety group, so I'll just keep him there. But you got to throw him in there as well. So I guess you could technically say 5 maybe with the corners, but across the board, not surprised at all. Sam Franklin, best special teamer. Jamie Robinson, they drafted him, and I would be stunned if they'd go out and cut a guy like that. And I mean, he's in a room where he can grow and kind of develop and get molded into. I mean, he's got some pretty good guys in front of him, and Von Bell and Xavier Woods, who've done it at a high level for many years. So, yeah, no qualms about that room at all.
Yeah, and that's a good point about Jeremy Chin, and you can even say that about Jamie Robinson as well. I'm sure he's going to play some nickel. So, yeah, I mean, no surprises for me either. I do think that Sam Franklin is going to be more than a special teamer for this team. I think that he's shown in the preseason an ability to play in coverage, play defense, and play good. He's a hard hitter. He brings an attitude to the defense that I think that they want. So I think that Sam Franklin has earned opportunity in Carolina to be more than a special teamer, and which he's very good at. And not to take away from that, but I think that if it were me and I were a safety, I would probably want playing time on the field as well in a meaningful game, and I'm sure that's what he wants. So I'm excited that potentially he's going to get that opportunity here in Carolina this season.
Yeah, let's move to the practice squad. So we got through the roster. We can go through the kicker and special teams, I guess, quickly, but we already know who they are. Eddie, Johnny, JJ, no real surprise there with that group, and that's a pretty damn good room, to be brutally honest. But let's talk about this practice squad because that is kind of the next move. It's a 16-player practice squad. And, there's, I think, a lot of the guys that were cut today that are going to be a part of, the scout team basically for the Panthers. So just any guys, Bryson, even if I don't know if you have some guys that are not, part of this team that have been put on waivers, but practice squad guys, we'll start with that and then we'll go to waiver claims. So practice squad guys, anyone on this roster that you hope Panthers bring back?
Yeah, I think most practice squads are filled from cuts of cutting to the 53-man roster for each team. So a lot of these guys are going to be back on the practice squad if they're not claimed from other teams in the league. So, guys like Raquan Williams and Deontay Brown and some of those, I'm sure Shai Smith, if he's not claimed, will be on the practice squad. Iku Leota and Kobe Jones. I mean, just to name a few, just the guys that, we did think had a potential to make this roster and that showed some form of potential. I'm sure they're going to try to bring back on the practice squad. So they may try to scour other teams for a couple players here and there, but our practice squad is mostly going to be made up of the guys that we've been talking about that didn't make the 53, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hope they bring Shai back. Obviously, a local guy, and I think he's played a decent amount in this league, so he's got valuable playing time. It's not like you're bringing, if you do have to bring him up, you're bringing in a guy who hasn't played a snap, in the NFL.
Yeah,
in a regular season game. So that's a guy. Spencer Brown, I really like. He played really well. You can never bank. I mean, we've already had Miles Sanders dealing with a growing injury, so bringing him or putting him in there, I think, is beneficial. I'm biased. I think STO needs to be brought back on the practice squad as well. I think he had some value. At one point, I get it. It's just like a preliminary depth chart, but he was the backup nickel corner to Jeremy Chin on the depth chart for a bit before his injury. So I feel like that guy adds some. And then you mentioned some of the other guys. But again, 16 guys. So technically, Carolina is going to have like I think it's a 69-man roster. That's including the practice squad guys. So again, not a lot of, obviously payment's going to be different for them and what they're getting paid paid weekly. But
yeah.
A lot of these guys are going to find homes, and some of them I'm sure are going to be claimed off waivers. And let's talk about waivers because Carolina is in a really good spot to claim guys from other teams. So teams have until tomorrow to place a claim on a player, and we should expect these things to start coming out and figuring out who they've claimed. It sounds like around noon tomorrow, noon Eastern. And the Panthers are 9th in the order. It's just like the draft. So the Panthers hold the 9th waiver claim. And Bryson, I know you put out a list today, so you've already teased this a little bit, but who are guys you either want Carolina to claim or guys that you want Carolina to target in free agency now that they've been cut?
Yeah, and just before we get started, the waiver claim process, it works like, so of course the Bears will have the first choice of any player they want and any amount of players they want. So once they put in all of their claims, then it goes to team two. Team two gets put in all of their claims. So it's not you pick one player and it's on to the next. So just so we're aware of that, I do think that Carolina will lose out on a couple guys because of that being at 9. But they are high up in the order, thank goodness. Yeah. So just to mention a couple of people that I would hope that Carolina would have some interest in as a guy that we know well in the NFC South, played for the Saints, was cut today, surprisingly. I believe he was their corner 2 or corner 3, Bradley Roby. It's been a popular, choice, I guess, for Panthers fans, for the Carolina Panthers to reach out to and bring him in as a corner here in Carolina. And I think that he would definitely upgrade that corner room depth-wise, like we just talked about. You got 4 people listed there. And Bradley Roby, I don't think Bradley Roby is worse than CJ Henderson. I think that he could be potentially better than CJ Henderson. So he's a guy that I would love to see Carolina target and bring in. And then just another guy, Danny Shelton. He's a defensive tackle. The Chiefs cut today. I believe Carolina has tried to sign him in the past. I'm not sure. I believe something happened with a physical, if I'm not mistaken, but another thin room that could use a player like him, a veteran in this league, who's definitely shown some ability to be an effective player. And then I'll just do a wide receiver. Michael Strachan from the Colts has history with Frank Reich. He is a 6'5" wide receiver that runs a 4.3 40. Definitely has all the measurables that you would want. I believe he's from the Bahamas, so he came in through like a program, I believe, like the guy that was a defensive lineman in Carolina under Ron Rivera. I can't remember his name, but F.A. Abada. Yeah, that's what it was, F.A. Abada. So he came in through a program like that, and, he has shown a little bit of ability to be a decent option. So a 6'5" guy, which Carolina doesn't really have a super tall go get it receiver. I guess TMJ is probably the closest thing they got to that. So just a couple to name a few, but I mean, I could probably make a list as long as the 53-man roster of guys that they should at least check out and bring in for a tryout, or bring in to potentially be on the practice squad or even on the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I had Bradley Roby as well. I think that's with this room being so thin. I mean, that's just seems too obvious for Carolina not to do. That's a guy, though, they would need to, figure out a deal and sign. You can't claim him because he's been in the league for so many years.
You can't claim him off waivers?
I don't believe so. I think he can sign anywhere, from my understanding, the way I read it. So I think it's like if you've been in the league 4 years or less than 4 years, you can be claimed off waivers. If you've been in the league more than 4 years, you can sign with a team. From my understanding, I could be wrong on that, but that's what I read, and I think it was put out by one of the national reporters, Pelissero or something like that. So that's a guy I would like. I mean, Carolina, the Saints tried to trade him, so they clearly think he's valuable.
Yeah, and something to mention that I forgot to about Bradley Roby is that he has history with Ejiro Evero. When Evero was with the Broncos, Roby was with the Broncos, so they had that history together, and that may be something that entices him to sign with Carolina.
Yeah, so Roby was one for me. Devin Allen, wide receiver. I don't think they're going to add a wide receiver just based off of the room they have now and the trade they made today. But the guy seemed intriguing. He ran a 4.35, really good returner. He can return the ball as well. Came from Philly. He's a former Olympian. He flashed in preseason. So that was a guy. But again, I don't think it's very likely at this point. And then a couple other positions. I do think they're going to add a nose tackle or someone on the D-line, and a couple guys that I was just doing some research on. Mike Purcell, he's a nose tackle from Denver. He played with Evero last year. He got cut 6'3", 328. He underwent knee surgery this past season, but he recently passed his physical and he was activated on the team. I was looking at his PFF grades overall, and these were in the green. And green is good for these guys, and this number might seem low, but overall he was a 67 with a 69 run defense. His pass rush wasn't as good, but as a run defender, he was a pretty decent player. He was drafted by the 49ers, so that's a guy to watch out for. I went to Wyoming. And then another guy I put on there was this Braden Fajeko. He's also another nose tackle. He's a little bit slimmer, 6'2", 300 pounds, but he's played in a 3-4. He's coming from, I want to say the Steelers signed him this offseason. He comes from the Chargers, but I was reading this article, and he had this quote, and this sounds like a Frank Reich guy, but he says, I take pride in playing inside in between the tackles, playing physical, playing rugged. I'm not really a flashy guy where I'm going to go and swim move a guy or going to be Aaron Donald, but I think what I do fits with Pitt wants out of me as a player. They just play rugged every play, and that's what I grew up doing, and that's what I grew up loving. So he seems like a guy. His stats aren't as great, though. From going off of PFF, it's pretty damn low. It's in like the 40s. But again, a guy he played with San Diego for a couple of years, but another guy to just watch because I do think they'll add to that room. And then one other guy I found on Twitter was Tyree Phillips. He's a tackle for the Giants. They cut him today.
Yeah.
There was a couple people that had said, they were shocked. That was one of the cuts they were shocked by for the Giants. And Jordan Schultz called him a big-bodied lineman with upside who's healthy and ready to help someone. So, again, something to look forward to. I believe he played in Baltimore. Yeah, he was drafted in Baltimore in the 3rd round in 2020. So he's pretty young. What? I guess 3rd year in the league. Jeez. But a guy to watch because Carolina they need to add corner, offensive line, defensive line without a doubt, I think. And I think that will happen here within the next day or two. So
could you look up somebody for me on PFF there if you've got it pulled up?
Yeah, what's up?
Darius Rush. He was a corner that was cut by the Colts today. Very surprising cut. He a former South Carolina guy. Of course, he's got the history of Frank Reich being cut by the Colts, but he was a guy that was a starter in Indianapolis for a while. He struggled. He had a bad camp, but is a player that has pretty high potential. He's young. I believe this is his 2nd or 3rd year in the league, and a guy that could come in and make a difference in that corner room.
Is this the guy? I think he's a rookie. Did they really cut him?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, okay, he's a rookie. Okay, I was confused on that.
This is the guy from the Gamecocks that we talked about during the mock drafts.
Yes.
Yeah, they need to get this guy on the phone, and I'm sure J.C. Horn has mentioned because he played with J.C. Horn, I believe, with he's a Gamecock. He played with J.C. Horn, and we talked about this guy. I remember this guy, and when you said the name, I'm like, "There's no way this can be the guy," but it is. He was drafted in the 5th round, and they cut him. They cut this guy.
Wow.
And are we talking about the same guy here? We got to make sure we're talking about the same guy.
No, yeah, I got him confused with Cam Smith because I know Cam Smith was drafted this year from the Gamecocks, but he was a 2nd round pick, I believe. So I thought Darius Rush had been in the league for a while, but so he doesn't have the history with Frank Reich. But
he was cut. That's insane.
Yeah.
5th round pick and they cut him?
Yeah. So.
Oh my! What are they doing in Indy, man? Between Jonathan Taylor and that, what the hell are you doing over there?
I don't know. So forgive me on my mistake with Darius Rush, but a player that potentially could come into Carolina and add to that cornerback room. So.
Yeah, I was trying to pull his stats up from college because let's see if I can get it here quickly. Yeah, here we go. So his coverage last year was an 80 in college football.
Pretty good.
Defensively, he was, I don't know what that means, but he was ranked 77 overall defensively. And he had 2 interceptions last year and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. And
6 pass breakups and only 1 penalty. So, yeah, I remember talking about him during the mock drafts. That was a guy we were looking at in, I want to say like the 2nd or 3rd round, if I remember that right.
Wow.
But yeah, that's a guy. I wish I would have looked at. I'm shocked that he was cut. So I had no idea. But that's definitely on my that guy better be on their list because J.C. Horn's got familiarity with. I'm sure they've talked. And Frank talked about today how Adam Thielen gave them a pretty good report on the wide receiver they just got.
Yeah,
because he played in Minnesota. So and Frank said he takes everything. He puts value in that from his players. So. I'm sure J.C. Horn put a good bug in their ear about him. So, yeah, that'll be one to watch for tomorrow. I'm excited now.
Yeah. Darius Rush. Not a former starter for the Colts, a rookie that got no playing time, and they cut him immediately.
Yeah, I looked his name up, and it was like, there's no stats for 2022. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see. I'm sure Scott ain't done making moves and making trades. And, hopefully this roster is set and they can make a push and get ready for Atlanta week 1. So I'm excited. I'm fired up and I'm ready for the football season to get underway. You have anything else you want to add? I think I'm good.
I hope they make a couple moves tomorrow and add to these rooms that we've talked about to add some depth, or potentially, unfortunately, might be a starter in this season upcoming. So yeah, I'm excited to see the moves and see what tomorrow brings.
We want to thank everyone for tuning into the Panthers on Tap podcast. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Panthers on Tap for all your analysis and breaking news. And as always,